Alright, I've brought this project far along enough that I am finally ready to begin actually adding some structure to it. But as soon as I saw it, some of these overviews that they had, there's a lot going on, and it all seems to be well thought out, a lot of different things happening on all of these different facades. And I was glad that this was preserved. It's going to present some challenges going forward, but I was glad that this was preserved and not sacrificed for something else at the moment. So we kind of have an open slate over there, but this is a big, tall, powerful structure, so that needs to be married in with whatever we do going forward. But I had to put together enough of the details on this just to get a feel for it, to start to kind of interact with it a little bit. And I didn't put the stuff that wasn't needed. This south side back here with the garage, I didn't draw this because it wasn't needed, but I did consider that, again, this facade, as with the rest, has something kind of fanciful going. So I wanted to consider all this and take it into account as we tried to put something on this side here. And these are just, I put together the existing structure because I need enough of it to be able to make something worthwhile come from that. So I put together enough of this that I was able to kind of understand that some of the stuff you think you don't need, but look how all these vertical lines of that downspouting are significant. So, and you can see how much power this has out here. And this is, I mean, down the hill it's a little different. And I wanted to account for this existing landscaping and integrate that into whatever we put together going forward. There's a lot I would like to convey, and I'll probably forget about some of it. For example, even as I edit this film, it has occurred to me that I forgot to mention as I went through these photos of the finished existing structure that at a certain point you will see where I have adjusted that brown to be exactly that Sherwin-Williams strong brown, or whatever it was called. And that happens, and you can see it if you go back and look at this again. You can see it happen along the way, and here it happens at the last two photos of this group. So if you want to go back and review that, my brown was based on photos and so forth, and this is the actual our red, green, and blue values of that Sherwin-Williams color. And it happens toward the end of each of those groups of photos from each view. And now back to your regularly scheduled program. And if we're going to keep this structure here, and my feeling is that we should, because as part of what was put together as a whole with everything else that's happening with this. So, but I have begun to put, there's some more of this film yet, and I've begun to pursue some of the things that I show in that film. And I know I can already tell that it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I look forward to that. However, beyond those challenges, which generally can be overcome one way or another, there are challenges with regard to how much we're going to be allowed to build on that side of the house, given the zoning code. This is governed by Warren County Rural Zoning Code, and apparently probably by the HOA that own, particularly the ones that own this plot of land here, which is the HOA. And I don't know if this was done with a permit, and maybe because this is so open frame, that's allowed, but I'll ask you about that, and that'll have to be accounted for going forward. But this is, that's your trellis there, your pergola there. These are the setback lines according to the Warren County Code, 30 feet and a minimum of 50 feet total, with a minimum of 20 feet on one side. So they want to add up to 50 with a minimum of 20 on one side or the other. And from here it looks like this was the side that is the 20. And this particular, and when I first started this was a little different because we didn't really have some dimensions here, but using those two different mortgage surveys that were sent over here, I used the more generous of those to put together this site plan here, and that's what we have. And when you go in closer, the pergola, and here's the 3 windows, and this is where we want our porch to come out here. And so even doing something like this, and 7 foot is kind of a minimum, and this leaves aside how we integrate with this here. But even a minimal kind of porch, maybe 7 foot deep, and this way, enough to have some room. I mean, it can be shorter, but either way, even starting from 7 feet deep, we are into this required side yard, meaning that anything we want to build that's going to be in front of this, it's going to be north of this, is going to have to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals, presumably for Warren County rural zoning, and try to overcome the objections they would have to building into this setback area. And I'll discuss that a little bit more here in a minute. And if you're unfamiliar, it's just if you're going to do something that's outside of the zoning code, then you go before a board of members. In this case, it would be Warren County Board of Zoning Appeals. And it looks to me like they hold hearings pretty frequently on Tuesdays. So they had them on every Tuesday of the month in one of the months. So they must have them fairly frequently. However, that caused me to do a little bit of research with regard to this particular project. And when I looked up, an application for this, to do this zoning variance, if you ended up having the appetite to try to go down that road and see if we could get anything built over there as a porch. But I went through this document here, this application, and at 13072, it looks to me like, I don't know what they mean by development, and I won't be able to call them till Monday. I don't know what they mean development within a PUD. But if by development they mean this sort of thing, adding a porch to one side, this is their zoning map, and it looks to me like you are in a PUD. So that question will have to be answered. But we'll leave that until the beginning of the week and return to our discussion. It's going to be, presumably, if the PUD owns this or rules this, if the PUD of that development has final oversight over what happens, then it's going to have to go before them, or they must have some rules as well that I haven't even endeavored to track those down yet, because I've just now encountered this, even as I made this film. So we'll leave that whole thing aside and just get on with the discussion, and know that those questions will have to be addressed going forward, and we'll have a little bit more information at the beginning of the week. But leaving that aside and acting as if we were going to have to get some sort of a variance to build anything, these are some of the different looks at what sort of challenges we would have. And I don't know, since you are 30 feet up there already, this is the only place you'll have your minimum 30, but you will be asking them to vary both the minimum side yard requirement of 20 feet and the net total of 50. So there will be those two things to overcome. And this shows a 19. If we were to build this 19 by 7, I'm not saying it could be gracefully integrated with what you have there, but if we were to build that, we'd be, reducing that from 20 to 17. If we were to go a little bit further, it'd be 16. And really, I think that's almost a minimum that we can make something work. And I've only investigated this a little bit, but my first look is that it's going to be. But I haven't done enough to actually comment on that. Offhand, though, I think 8 is going to be a little bit shallow. I think 8 would be the minimum, but I just don't think that we can make something like this work. That said, I haven't actually tried yet. But I would think that would be the minimum kind of depth anyway, the 6 feet depth that we could make something valuable out there. And more appropriately, I think, for what is happening really with regard to both the whole property, the estate, and all the developments so far there, I think something larger, if this is something that you agree with, I think something larger is possibly going to be easier to integrate with this, and possibly more appropriate, because this is a big structure that has a lot of power. So we don't want to just have a couple little decorative pieces out here. I'd like to make this all work as a whole, simply because of how the approach has been with the rest of the property, the rest of the estate. So we will answer, some of these zoning questions at the beginning of the week, and that will be your first major decision, is whether you have the appetite to continue to pursue this, or whether we just cut our losses at this point. I've been to probably at least 2 or 3 dozen of these hearings, and probably we have managed to prevail in 90% of the cases. Most times because we had a good argument for it. And in this case, I think you have a lot of mitigating factors, and factors that will help you out as well. This lot down here is just owned by the HOA, and we are really just decorating. If we manage to put together a design that works well with this, we're going to be actually increasing the appeal of this facade quite a bit from what it is now. And this is not going to obstruct anyone's view from anywhere. So there's a lot of good things to be said for this. And I think if we put together something that's inspired and that's worthwhile, that I don't think that we're going to have a problem, even if we were reducing this to 12 feet. So that said, we'll answer those questions at the beginning of the week, and we'll continue with what I intended to show you so far, which also contains some other important decision points, particularly if you go forward with this. So, coming to some of those decision points and considerations, and I hope I don't forget too many of them. We're just going to be looking at this facade here, this north facade. And one of the first things to consider is whether this base structure, the part that you stand on, whether that is constructed more like a traditional frame porch with some sort of covering under here and wood framing, with no concrete work except for the foundation work, or whether this is a more hardscape type thing with foundation walls and perhaps a concrete floor. Now, if it's going to be a concrete floor, if it's going to be the latter, then we have this window that will have to be probably lost, because of how we're going to support this and etc. Just know that would be lost in that sort of environment. So I didn't look at that offhand, because it's probably a more expensive project, but it will probably be something that we will at least look at if we explore further with this project, just in terms of how things integrate with this piece over here. And the reason I say that with regard to the concrete versus frame foundation work and frame floor work probably will become clearer as we go through a few more slides here. So one of the first considerations is going to be how you want to come out of the doors that are ultimately going to be here. This red line represents your finished first floor where you're standing on when you're in this room. And this represents if we were to build that where you just walk out level. Even this front little stoop here is down a couple inches. It looked like to me that this was down 2 or 3 inches. And so this is coming right out, not stepping down. You can see that these 3 vents, and they should be able to be dropped down and located through here. As I recall, this is unfinished basement here. I don't like you losing this window here, but you do have this additional one with the window well here not shown. But those 3 would have to come down in the event you want it up there, regardless of what construction it is. And if this whole thing is concrete, those will have to be presumably routed through that concrete. Those will have to be addressed, those 3 vents. And I don't know what those 3 are from. You'll update me on that. Okay, so there it is coming out level with that, and this is just hypothetically 19 feet wide because we can do that. We have enough space here without disturbing this, and I really don't want to disturb those. In the event somebody wanted something giant, yeah, I would come over even further and have those die into the front of it or something. But in this case, I'm just showing this 19-foot wide porch type hypothetical here. And so the alternative is to step down one riser, say step down 7 inches or so onto this like you do at your front porch. These will still need to be addressed in some way or another, but presumably that can be done easily enough. But now you see how we're framed over this window and we still have room for our stairs to come down. And this, if you step one of your stairs, I'm sorry that thing keeps coming. So if you step down one step onto the porch from the first floor, we can get down to this patio, this finished patio, and we will probably, my feeling is that this will be integrated with additional hardscape of a similar style and material as this. But if you step down once from your first floor to the porch, then it would be 1, 2, 3 more to this here. So in any event, whether that's down here or up one riser, it's going to be 4 all the way to down to this bottom here, just like it is back here. I don't want to spend a lot on this next section because it's also hypothetical. But as I said earlier, if we're going to integrate this structure here, then probably we're going to have some similar columns or motifs as these here coming over here. And now these are some various just little considerations that I was looking at, and none should be taken seriously until they're more seriously looked at. My first inclination was to do some sort of hip roof all the way around it with a similar pitch as this here, and then some sort of a lower pitch slope up on top of that, and seeing how something like that might be integrated with that pergola. And then of course there's the consideration toward gable, and you could see that even a gable will work with that existing window up there. I'm going to go back 1 second because this actually just occurred to me when I was doing a little bit of work on this sort of structure, is if a person was really ambitious, I don't know what this room is here, but yes, if a person was really ambitious and was able to accomplish the setback requirements, etc., they could look at a 2-story structure with a 2nd-story porch, because I took some time when I was out there the other day to actually look in the other direction beyond where we're working, looking down the hill, and that's awfully nice looking down there. And it was a lot easier to see the motivation to build something out there, to have a view of that, have an accessible outdoor view, covered view of that. But yes, if a person was particularly ambitious, they could probably come up here with the 2nd story and actually have a porch up there as well. Leaving that aside, a gable roof is also can be considered. Typical gable or hip, whatever ends up working well. I mean, everything on the house is gable at the moment, but as I said, there's a lot of fanciful things going on. So to me, we're kind of wide open on where we can go with this because of everything else happening in the whole house. So if we did something like a gable roof, for example, and as I said, I'm just kind of funning around at the moment and looking at some different possibilities, and there are a lot of possibilities. So this is typical gable roof, and the pitch of these planes are matching these ones here, and you start having, that can be even trusses across there, and that's your ceiling height is pretty high, well above 9 feet here, and you can even have scissor trusses, so that's this way super pitched like this, and this could be open frame type things. It all depends on how ambitious or how where you want to go with that. But this is kind of an open frame structure with very high ceilings, ceiling fan, etc. And who knows, maybe there's bric-a-brac work out here, open frame truss or something like that out at this end. So that could be kind of nice, just decent to explore in any event. But just simple trusses over or scissor trusses over is also a possibility. Also, I missed it, forgot to say it or catch it. There's also the opportunity you could just step down 2 or 3 inches to kind of keep the dust out. And when you do that, that gets you where you could just come down 3 more risers, 1, 2, 3, to this floor. They would be steeper risers. So I kind of prefer something a little more gentle, but that's beside the point. And now, without stretching this film out longer than it needs to be, because I did put together a quick something here just to illustrate a few things about why this thing almost has to be at least 8 foot deep to have some sort of decent integration with what's happening here. I believe I built this off the idea of a diagonal line through these 3 columns here, these 2 existing ones and a new one here. And then enough space here to have these stairs come down generally to the front of this patio. And I did try to model this as close as I could, and I got the critical points over here, but I am still missing something because it is closer to this column than what I'm showing here. But there's a lot of furniture, and I didn't take the time to really diagram that out, but I might have to make another trip if we begin to continue to pursue some of these avenues. But this is just 8'2" finished kind of thing, which gives you about 7.5 feet inside the thing, and that gets our stairs out here, allowing them to integrate. And I'm not sure exactly what we do with this space back here, but that's one reason why I'm kind of looking at that kind of depth in any event. And then I guess one final consideration that occurred to me is whether you have railings on either of these open ends. And again, this is really early exploration here, and I'm reluctant to even show this, but I got this far. We would not have that transom light if this is the situation. I don't even know if this was just pasted from the other door, so I don't even know if those will actually work. But this was a quick look just to get a feel for this space, etc. As long as I'm here making this film. And you can see, these risers come down. This needs to be adjusted because I have you stepping down from here on this. So kind of ignore whether, because as I said, there's other things I want to look at and explore. This was just put together to address a few questions that should be, under consideration going forward. And you don't need a railing, at least on this left end here. That's low enough to the ground that if you didn't want any kind of railings there, if you just want this open through to these plants, etc., that can be opened through here. As I said, I don't want to make this film overly long, but let's just see. And this ground is not completely modeled here, but in any event, I think even if you were to come out further than this, you would probably begins to become a close call. So with this kind of minimal approach, you could probably keep this where you didn't need any railings here at all. Maybe you wanted all steps to come down here, down through here, or another set through here. But it starts to approach as soon as we get a little bit, around this area, maybe a little bit beyond, it starts needing railings because it's above 30 inches from that finished grade there. So probably some railings will be needed, is my best guess, is that's where we'll end up. And then so one other consideration then becomes for a person to think about. And as I said, it looks like these doors are wider than what you'll have, because that was the existing opening there. And maybe this is, a door, similar built, similar to what you have over there, with just one center operating panel, and smaller side lights, or maybe that is a sliding door. Again, that is all stuff that we will consider going forward. There are a variety of different doors that can open up through this existing sized opening. But if that opening stays where it is and we occupy it, we have to consider, I'd like to see this just all in railings across here, and then use the necessary structural members up here and going back toward the house, so that we can keep this open here up on top. Now if you wanted more of a sense of enclosure, I'm not sure whether you divide that into 2 openings or 3, but that is something that would probably be looked at and should be considered. So this was an extra to this film. Just coming back here so I don't get too carried away. I'm going to end it here with those considerations now. But I do have one more section that I want to cover. I was going to cover it earlier, but I did not, and I saved these photos from when I took them out there. And if we're going to keep this pergola and keep some of these details, keep these kind of column, the way the columns look at, etc., some of these issues, and I don't know what's happening here, if this is rot, but some of the issues ought to be remediated with this right now before it goes much further, particularly with regard to these bases down here. And the design is kind of a poor one in terms of watershed, because that's, as near as I can tell, that's made of wood and not plastic wood like AZEK. I don't think the column's rotting, but these bottoms, there's just no real opportunity. They haven't provided any kind of opportunity for watershed. And so I think one way or another that should be looked at a little bit harder and see where the problematic areas are and how those can be addressed. Some of these bases is just where the stuff is occurring. Here's my best guess, quickly and on the fly, is that these bottoms are rebuilt using plastic, AZEK, or some similar material that's completely impervious to water, so that you don't have to ever worry about those again. And then where they're integrated with this, I think a person almost has to put some sort of a little flashing piece in here, cut into that wood a little bit, and put some sort of aluminum or plastic flashing so that these become much more effective going forward. A similar thing probably should happen, I don't have a photo of it here, but a similar thing should probably happen up at that water table at the top too, because those are getting exposure, and I don't know how long they're going to last without that being addressed at the start. Particularly these bottoms. The tops, I don't know how long that's been there, I think 10 years perhaps, maybe more, and they're doing fine. So it's really just these bottoms that are showing some wear and tear. So I just want to cover that. Oh, but I do want to emphatically say that a person should not take this first simple drawing as anything serious. And this is more or less just exploring what's going to transition down through here more than these roofs, because I would like to do a little bit more work on this, or a lot more work on this up here, to see what exactly happens. But as I said, the possibilities are literally myriad out here if we're allowed to build a large enough structure that will work. So that is all for now, and I am sure we will talk. That window's not right. I don't think that's divided at all. But that's all for now. As I said, this is immensely pleasurable, and I will see what we will talk at the beginning of the week in any event, I presume. That's all for now. Thanks very much. Oh, I know, I will cover this right now because I said I would. So, with regard to this wood framing, here we're able to, and it'd be better actually if this is able to come forward some and integrate, through there, and then maybe this porch comes over further so that we can have structure, because we're not able to go through that brick and do anything. So we have to have structure back here. So I would think that, all of this stuff, everything moves this way if it's possible, so that we can have a piece of structure down here on the right side of that window in the event of a framed kind of approach like this. And this would be screened off with appropriate, traditional lattice work or something like that down here, which might work very well with this. So as I said, so very much to consider. But thank you very much, and I will be in touch. Actually, we're going to return one more time, because I was looking over these plans that you already had drawn for another project, and in the event you had any misgivings or second thoughts about backing out of that project or otherwise declining it, I want to look at that for a minute. This actually leads me to believe that perhaps that is governed by the HOA, and the HOA already had a look at it and approved it as it was drawn. But if not, because if so, this was what he was proposing, all covered structure, open porch, but all covered structure. And that would be asking them to vary this to 10 foot 6 inches. So if that's the case, and that already happened, then we're in fine condition for whatever we'd like to construct over there. which is semi-scary because the sky would be the limit then. But I think it wouldn't take much if we were allowed, something in here. That would be pretty good. But I'm glad I returned to that, and it's just something, another bit of information for you to have. Still glad you didn't build this. So I'll be in touch. This time it's the end for sure.